Hello and welcome to Linguistics 11, Introduction to Linguistics. My name is Miroku Nemeth. I've been teaching linguistics for West Hills College pretty much continuously from 2016, uh, almost every semester, including summers. And I love linguistics. I love it as a major, as a discipline, as a world of knowledge with a very different. I have a master's in linguistics that I got in '96 with a focus in ESL pedagogy teaching, and a bachelor's in linguistics. I wanted to teach overseas, and I did for a couple of years. I taught full time in Saudi Arabia for 2 years in the uh, Institute of Public Administration, 1 year in Riyadh, 1 year in Dammam, and but I started teaching international students at Fresno State in '95, tutored and taught for years there. Um, I taught Fresno City and the Madera Center English and ESL, um, and I've taught Reedley and a whole bunch of colleges. I taught for 14 years at Kalinga High School, ELD is, or what they called ELD, and they always change the name of it. Really, some of the names are not very good. Before it was LEP, Limited English Proficiency, and other things like that. But people who are coming to learn English or are learning English, um, and they may know multiple language. It may be a second language, a third language, a fourth. Um, but I also taught. I taught at Kalinga High School for 14 years. Taught Sanger for a year. Taught one semester back in the '90s in Madera at the high school. So I've taught, including student teaching, seventh grade at Edison Computech, but mostly outside of teaching college. 13 years now for West Hills in Lemoore and Kalinga, but outside of teaching college, I've taught high school about 15 and a half years. Um, and so I love this program because well, linguistics itself is a very unique subject, area of study with a lot of, as an umbrella area of study, it has so many different things you can study. And I'm supposed to introduce you to, 18 sub 18 or 20 sub areas within linguistics. Um, and so what I have to do is, I was looking for my original textbook, but I don't see it. Um, Expose you to a lot of things, and I'll go to a little bit of depth in all of them. But almost every subject for a week that we have, it could be it is a class in and of itself. So many of these sub areas, whether it's phonetics or phonology or syntax or um, sociolinguistics or psycholinguistics or historical linguistics, um, or sub areas like history of the English language or anything like that. Those are all in and of themselves courses that you can take like at a graduate or undergraduate as well as a graduate level, and a lot of them I have. So I want to give you an exposure to linguistics, and what I find, the essays in my class for the midterm and the final will be, what have you learned about linguistics since taking this course, and giving me examples. And invariably, some of the things are the same, but a lot of things are different because you could be interested in all kinds of different things. And linguistics is very broad in that sense. It's also, if I was an English teacher. I am an English teacher. I'm teaching critical thinking in 1A this semester, as well as a basic skills kind of co-rec for English. Um, and so I've been an English. I am an English teacher, but being an English teacher is working to be a gatekeeper for a certain dialect of the English language, right? That has power, has hegemony. And what linguists do, like is we are descriptivists. We look at how people use language, and we can look at power structures related to that language use, but we don't assign judgment necessarily. So we don't say that one dialect is better than another. We'll say they're different than each other. Every dialect of English will have standard rules of grammar and certain vocabulary and all these other kind of things. And what's really freeing about linguistics is that you don't get what you get in an English class a lot of the times. I mean, we'll know those rules, we'll know the history of those rules, which is actually very freeing as well. Um, but we won't necessarily have the judgments that you get in an English class, where you know, teachers can do kind of petty kind of things. And if you look at English is a language of colonization. That's why it's all over the world, right? So I want people to be good in academic English, to do well in how they use it, and to feel fluency in every way, and rhetorical strength, so they can do well in academia or in jobs. But I don't necessarily buy all the things that come with that. And I just want people to understand that, because it's very different than, say, an English class. What I do in my classes is I break things down according to week. And in the 18-week course, I'm going to give you different assignments, usually that are grouped according to the sub area of linguistics. So, introduction to linguistics, we have first day questions about linguistics. Many of you may be entering the class not knowing what linguistics is. That's what I found teaching the class for some time. But I ask some questions to get you thinking about linguistics and language studies. Crash Course a few years ago, maybe 2 or 3, started making linguistics videos, and crash courses are great. I like them for studying, for tutoring, for helping students with things. So I'll be integrating crash course linguistics. First one, what is linguistics, throughout the course. And I say take notes. In general, I just want notes. I don't want,
What if you could do SEO
I don't want you
smarter
to
and fast?
worry too much about the structure of the notes. I mean, it's kind of a personal choice. I just want to make sure whenever I ask for notes, you're covering what's said adequately, and it shows that you had some attention to what was being said, whether it's a 10-minute video or a half-hour video, 20-minute video, that you're getting the major points and absorbing them. And some people like really structured notes. They make tables and stuff like that. And some people it's just real informal. You write them by hand, but I want them to be of adequate length. We'll be doing a lot of this. I think that a lot of people do learn through video and through simple ways of teaching, and so I do have this crash courses and a whole bunch of other videos from a whole bunch of other sources. If you want to learn more about linguistics, a lot of the time some of the other sources I give you will be great resources for linguistics. So I want either you can take a whole bunch of notes. Usually it's about 2 pages, depending on how you take notes, or write a 3-paragraph reaction to Steven Pinker's Linguistics as a window to understanding the brain. There's some problems with Steven Pinker in general. Like a lot of academics, he was found to be a friend of Epstein, which I don't know if he went to the island, nobody knows, but it is problematic. And some of his other books, not that good. His book, The Language Instinct, How the Mind Creates Language, is a really great book on linguistics, even though he's a cognitive psychologist. But there's a lot of overlap between cognitive psychology and linguistics. So, other scholars, I don't know. I mean, anyway, it's a good breakdown of linguistics, of the different areas in linguistics, and it's very useful at the beginning of the course and then at the end of the course, like tying everything together. I want you to leave this course with a certain knowledge of linguistics. Remember, there's a transcript here too, so that helps. I always look for transcripts for videos because, especially if you're taking notes or answering questions. I'll be taking from a few different open source books. There is a new version of this. I don't want to use the newer version. I want to use this version, um, and right now still, and we'll change it up later. But what it has, which is pretty cool, linguist Catherine Anderson, very Canadian book. I mean, the ethics of everything are pronunciation as well. Has videos. It has videos, and she explains, what is linguistics? How is linguistics a science? I would say, where is linguistics a science? It's much like sociology or psychology. Some parts of it are science. Some parts of it are an art, right? And so there are some check yourself questions and other stuff. There's a script of the video. Um, yeah. So I'll be asking you to answer these. There are, I don't use a cultural anthropology book that much. But it's good to look at anthropology, how anthropology, the study of man, right, looks at language. Um, I will also say that, this, for example, this is a book, People's History of Structural Racism in Academia, from Administration of Justice to Zoology. I mean, Western educational institutions, most of them rose, I mean, in varying degrees, you know, with the prominence of kind of European imperialism and colonialism all over the world. And it really reached its peak in the 19th and 20th century at a time when, the dominant theories that were put forth by Europeans and Americans were white supremacist theories. Uh, you know, and Darwin was a part of it. His cousin, um, Galton, was the founder of the discipline, the pseudoscience called eugenics, and which was, good genes, the best genes, and theorized about which races were superior and inferior. Pretty important, kind of, the myth of race. Pretty important. The troubling persistence of an unscientific idea. Good to know about. Important to know about. Some of our institutions, like say Stanford, um, were founded. Great book, Palo Alto, right? History of California Capitalism in the World, but by Malcolm Harris. Stanford was, its first president was a eugenicist, and you get the Stanford Binet IQ test. You get the IQ test out of Stanford from that group of people who believed in white supremacy. Anglo-Saxon white men were the most superior men, et cetera, et cetera. You get, the early 20s, another eugenicist starting up the SAT. A lot of these, great book, IQ History of a Failed Idea or a Failed Test. There's all, anyway. Anthropology, though there were people in the early 20th century like Franz Boas who fought against kind of structural racism in anthropology. Anthropology often served, racist designs, and it's important to be straight up about that. The thing about language is human beings use language in a way that's distinct from animals, and according to science and how we understand science. So, looking at cultural anthropology is important. And there's other books like wiki books that talk about linguistics, and I'll dip into a little bit later. Uh, this is an interview. David Crystal is, kind of one of the most famous linguists, old school linguists still around. He's the Cambridge Encyclopedia of the English Language. One of his works. He does a lot of works like this. He's a great writer. Writes a lot of good books. I've read several of his other books. Great interviewer. And then he is working with a German in this video. 5 reasons for doing linguistics. Before when I did linguistics, it's either you're going to teach English or you're going to teach linguistics somewhere if you have the kind of privilege and academic hookup to do that. Now there's a lot more areas where you can work in linguistics, primarily in computational or analytical linguistics. So you're working with AI. So now if you look for jobs in linguistics, there are a lot of jobs, but almost all of them you need to know some kind of coding as well as syntax and other disciplines within linguistics really well. So this is an interview from the Virtual in Linguistics campus, Jürgen Hanke, and I have several videos from the Virtual Linguistics campus in this class. They're good. They have in-depth videos. You can watch more of them on your own. And that's the first one there, the Virtual Linguistics campus. If you're, I can only do so much in this class, introduce you to so much. And they're just great. These are native lang, great linguistic channel. This here, right? In Judaism and Christianity, there is this idea of the Tower of Babel, and that was the first language, and this is a discussion of things around it. Some people believe that on faith, but other people believe other things, and scientists have different ideas about different things. What scientists can do through historical reconstruction is go back. I mean, we only have writing for so long, right? Writing, and I have a later. I mean, most people, when they think of writing, you probably think of Mesopotamia, right, and Sumer and the cuneiform, right, and you think of Egyptian hieroglyphs or proto-hieroglyphs, right, and that's correct, but and then you get the Carthaginians, or I'm sorry, the Phoenicians. They made Carthage, who make this writing system, and then later the Greeks take it, but the Greeks don't take it until the 8th century, BC. In Africa and Egypt, it's been around for thousands of years before that. The Nubians also had a writing system. The people of Kush, south of Egypt, and there were places all over the world. So you have, Chinese writing systems. You have there were different writing systems. It's not just like if you open Western Civ books, they'll tell you 2 places, neither of which are in Europe, right? And they're in the Middle East, what they call the Middle East and Africa, and there were writing systems in the Americas as well. The most famous being Mayan. I have a whole video series on that later, which is pretty cool. There are 5-minute videos on the history of language or writing in different places, as well as questions on what you call orthography. Orthography is writing. I don't want to make this too long, and I'm already kind of doing it. But there is those. Yeah, India had its own, and Korea had adjustments. Anyway, so I just want to introduce you to some of the stuff, over the semester. Okay, I do have lots of extra credit. Basically, extra credit you can do it any time in the semester, early, late, whatever. It's I'm going to change these. So, these are things you'll need to know as we go closer to the midterm. This review material, I should probably move it from the first week. Okay. Week 2, animals and human language. Really vast subject, but I just have about 4 or 5 different things that you need to do. There are also flashcards from the previous. When we had a book, I was able to download the flashcards, and then I'm able to from this book, The Study of Language by Ewell. Um, yeah, that's not something that I'm going to question. Glossolalia, I'm not going to question you on that. But some of these I will question you on. You need to know what reflexivity is. You need to know, all right, what arbitrariness is, displacement. Those are all, characteristics of human language, not necessarily of animal language. Okay, so that's week 2. I need you to. I have made a Kahoot for the class, and I'm going to say this before the midterm. I'm going to say it before the final. I made a Kahoot which has most of the questions that are on. What I always hated about, like, say, science courses or any course where they're asking you to understand and process new information and then retain it, and then it's massive amounts of information. Is what I always hated is when they didn't actually tell you what do you need to know, what's on the midterm, what's on the final. What do you need to know to carry with you to the next level? Those kind of things. And so, what I did years ago is I made a Kahoot. If I have an in-person class, we'll play the Kahoot in class. And by the nature of Kahoot, I have to shorten, some of the questions. I can't have you can't have very long, and uh, and that messes it up. But this shows the answers. These questions will all be on your midterm, and I'm sorry, they'll be all on your final, up to, I believe, grammar, syntax will be on your midterm, and morphology, and then everything after that will be on the final. So I put in little comics and stuff like that too. Sometimes little videos. For IPA or phonetic transcription, it's mentioned in the syllabus, but like that says mystical, right? Um, you're supposed to learn IPA is a whole. It's very hard to learn thoroughly. So what I want to do is give you a few letters. I mean, a few words that you're testing on over and over, so at least they'll stay in your mind using certain of the symbols or certain parts of the orthography. And if you want to go in depth, I'll give you a whole IPA chart, and it's clickable, and you can decode stuff. And there's IPA decoders where you can take anything in normal language and put it into IPA alphabet, etc., etc. I have all that. But on the test, I'm not gonna do that. So these are the questions on the midterm and the final. So neologism, new words, right? Word formation where longer word is reduced to a form with y or ie at the end. That's telly instead of television, or veggie instead of vegetable. Compound words, compounding, waterbed. Okay, so new word, neologism. Borrowing from other languages, acronyms. You know, there is back formation, and this actually, like the image I have there gives you a definition of back formation, and a lot of these other ones. It'll either be a comic or it'll be an explanation, straight up explanation. So conversion. So Google was a noun. Now we use Google as a verb. You Google something. Okay, so there's a lot of that. I'll review it more for the midterm. I'll review it more for the final. Okay, morphemes. This is a little bit of the neuroscience. Those important areas for language function around the left ear. There is Broca's area, which is for production. Like if you say broken speech, if this is damaged, people can't. What they say will be incoherent. And there's Wernicke's area, which is for comprehension. And it kind of makes sense because Wernicke's area is here, closer to the ear, while Broca's area is a little bit up forward. Um, you know, Real interesting. Paul Broca was an actual eugenicist and really horrible racist too. Found that out doing some study this year. But those are the scientists that they named those parts of the brain off of. Um, okay, cognate. If cognate is like if the word like has the same roots in different languages and will show the relationship between the languages. Metathesis is like if you say ax for ask, you switch around two sounds, which happens a lot. Um, Adding a sound to the beginning of a word to make it easier to pronounce, like instead of scuola, you say escuela. From Latin to Spanish, that is epenthesis. Dialects, language variations used by regional social groups, while accents do have to do with pronunciation. Okay, so stuff about dialects. You can be bi or tri-dialectical. How many dialects do you think you speak, for example? Let alone, languages, but then within a language, how many dialects, right? The difference between pigeons and creoles. Pigeons, um, technically in linguistic terms, mean the language form that's just used for right then for people to interact and kind of make it if they speak different languages, while a creole is when those language forms have combined and it becomes an actual language. Um, Even that being said, things like they call it Hawaiian pidgin is actually a Creole, and some will call Creole. You need to know the history of the English language, right? Old English before 1066, before 1100, before the invasion of William the Conqueror in 1066, which a bunch of French-speaking Vikings, right, um, had take over England after the Battle of Hastings in 1066, and French becomes the language of the ruling class, and that changes English in a lot of ways. So you get this Middle English form, and that starts to change and change and change until around 1500. You have what you call early modern English. Hard for us to understand a lot of it too, but not as hard as Middle English, which you can pick out a few things, not that much, which is not as hard as like Old English, which sounds like a total foreign language like German or Frisian, very close to Frisian, but people don't usually hear Frisian, so it's not. You need to know that. You need to know places in the whole, the mouth, the throat, etc., etc. How do we make sounds, right? The places and manners of articulation, which will really help you to teach and to listen, to your students and help them. Um, Sometimes, usually, people want to be elementary school teachers, sometimes high school, sometimes speech pathologists, and if you're a speech pathologist, you're going deep, 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 deep into all of this. Um, we'll talk about different ways to teach English. We'll talk about first and second language acquisition, language development, uh, that kind of ties into to early childhood development, different writing systems. We'll talk about proto languages, especially like Proto Indo European, where the relationship of all these languages from Hindi and Urdu to Celtic languages to one big language family where you can find cognates or similar words in all these languages throughout Europe, except for Basque and Hungarian and Finnish, and I believe is it Estonian? I'm half Hungarian, so like the language my grandparents and great grandparents spoke, it's in Europe, but it's not part of the Indo-European group. Same with Finnish, and then Basque is not related to those two languages, but very interesting too. Interesting too because there's a lot of Basque. The Basques were throughout Central South America, and a lot of the common names that you have in Central South America are actually, even though you think of them as Spanish, they're actually Basque. Just learning more about that right now. Too. Basque history of the world, kind of interesting. Anywho, idiolect, your personal way of speaking, your personal dialect, as a way of getting to know the world. I want language families. I have so Sino-Tibetan. You're gonna know Chinese, Tibetan, those language families. Um, Afro-Asiatic. Um, this is Austronesian, right? The islands of Polynesia. Um, Dravidian, South India, primarily. Um, Indo-European. This one shows you really how Indo-European languages spread around the world through colonization. Um, and some indigenous languages, right? These are the Mayan languages, for example. These are the Quechuan, like from Quechua, that were used in the Incan Empire. Um, Uto Aztecan, like Uto, like Utah, the Utes, and then you get the Mono, the Paiute, right? So you see a lot the Sierra Nevada. Um, when you go to the east of where the Yokut, we're going up into the mountains, and then you get different um, big language group. It goes all the way, really, from like Canada all the way down to the very south of Mexico. Well, not the very anyway. Uh, you have the Niger Congo. Um, this is the Nilo-Saharan. Anyway, you'll need to know some of these language groups. Um, this is all on the Kahoot. That's telling you what you're going to need for the midterm as well as the final. So if you're like, what, so much stuff, what does this guy want me to know? I'm telling you right there what you need to know. Um, so if you use the Kahoot, it's going to help you a lot. Um, okay, so week 3 is phonetics, sounds of language, basic, from the basic. And we'll just be like, it's really important because you need to know the sounds of the language. And then what sounds are in another language. And if you're teaching, a different language group, certain sounds will be there, and certain ones won't. Certain ones will be harder for people, certain ones won't. And it varies. So looking at the physiology of speech, um, there's some, okay, so phonetics, this is the IPA, this is International Phonetic Alphabet, some videos on it. And then I have, in the announcements, I have a whole clickable kind of thing. I'm going to give you a link for which ones you need to know. This link went dead from, I think, University of Chicago, but I have to put, I fix anyway. I fix it. By the time we get to it, it'll be fixed. This accent expert, really good, really enjoyable stuff from Wired. And I think I put 2 or 3 of his accents. He's a dialect coach for movies, and it's a tour of U.S. accents, which I think most people have a certain amount of interest in. Um, and I put a couple of those in. So, okay, phonetics is like if you have a t sound, everything about the t sound. Do you aspirate it? Is it a full t sound? Is it, like in the middle of, do you say butter or do you say butter, right? Because that butter, like most Americans say, isn't even a t. It's what you call a flap. And so um, that's phonetics. Now, phonology is when you join sounds together. What are these regular patterns that are established? And Crash Course breaks it down. I have a little dialect quiz here. When you get to it, it's from the New York Times. Um, if you've used up your article limit on the New York Times, it won't let you do that. So I get that. There's directions if that happens. A little bit of history of the F word. Etymology, the history of words and the stories behind them and word roots. It's a very fascinating area of study. So that's just introduction to, it's a cuss word, so most people are kind of interested in that. But it could be any word, and looking at its use and then looking at the power relationships with that is also very interesting. Grammar and syntax, a really important concept of descriptivism versus prescriptivism, traditional ways of looking at grammar versus modern ways. I do a thing because a lot of people haven't studied, the 8 parts of speech in a long time. Nouns, pronouns, verbs, adverbs, adjectives, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections. People haven't done that in a long time, so I use Schoolhouse Rock. I've used it in ESL classes. I think it's fun. It might be nostalgia on my part, but I want you to list all the different parts of speech and list some examples, because odds are it stays in your brain better if you do that. But there's all kinds of deep, complex stuff that I'll expose you to that you don't have to master, but you may have to do more of later, where you're doing syntactical trees and you're labeling everything and stuff like that. Morphology is word formation, breaking words down to their smallest parts. As much as there's free morphemes, those that are already in their smallest parts can be used independently, like, I don't know, lexical morphemes like car, and functional morphemes like prepositions like for, and um, you know prepositions and pronouns like he or she, or um, and other ones that are actually limited within languages. You're going to do research on the etymology of 5 words. You look at word roots and derivations. Okay, and then really history of English, and a little bit on computational linguistics, though I don't really go into it at all. I just give you starting off point for crash courses. Okay, semantics is looking at meaning, how words create meaning. Pragmatics is how basically is looking at, like, we use words in a certain way, but how are we really using them? Like, if I say could like metaphorical language, the implications of what we're saying, what's understood and coded in our language. If I say something, it is not just the straightforward lexical meaning of a sentence or a statement. It's what do you translate it into in reality. That's pragmatics. The why. Why are you saying that? Okay, so critical discourse analysis is looking at discourse is any kind of text, speech, written language, etc., etc. And then discourse analysis is breaking it down, what's really being said, what's underneath what's being said. And critical discourse analysis looks at, like, what are the power relationships between what's being said and what's the argument structure. Now here it says review for midterm, basically a cheat video. Watch it and study what I outline. You can get 100% of the midterm and the final. Okay. Now this is true. I have 2 videos. Okay, I'm telling you, for the first week, I got a video for the midterm and a video for the final. I go over every question. So don't make things harder on yourself than you need to. Week 10, language in the brain, psycholinguistics, neurolinguistics. Week 11, first language acquisition. 12, second language acquisition, and it continues to the next. Week 14, sociolinguistics, which is a couple weeks because there's just all kinds of things we can cover in there. Then historical linguistics and language families. Endangered languages, looking at genocide, looking at colonization, looking at the consequences. I do have videos looking at the history of, the genocide of indigenous people in California, as well as what happened here in the Central Valley with the Yokut in general. And then because I'm teaching out of Lemoore, I have a video on the Tachi Yokut and the genocidal acts committed against them. And a preview for the final. Again, the review. It's all going to be there. The final is over 500 points. Make sure that you study for it, do well. There's a lot of work in this class, but I'm very reasonable about, you can, while it says, I have a late policy, I want you to do things at a certain time, etc., etc. If you're going through things, I can work with you. Just communicate with me. Really, by email is the best. I answer my email promptly, as long as I'm awake. And, I have a bad sleep schedule, so I'm awake a lot. I don't know. If you're having any trouble, I mean, I've been teaching a long time, seen a lot of stuff, and I'm there trying to help. I want to see everybody. I've had classes of 50-something students who have all all but two got A's, two got B's. In my teaching experience, on English 1A actually, transfer level courses, and I'm cool with that happening. I'd love to see everybody do well, get great grades. If you're having any kind of hardship or problems or trouble that keeps that, from being easy for you, or it seems like it's not doable, just communicate with me. Email me if you want to set up a meeting time at the school, whatever, we can do that. The Other than the midterm and the final due dates, if you fall behind, don't worry about it too much. It's a pacing like schedule rather than absolute hard. I won't accept it later. Except for the midterm and then the final. The final, I don't have as the class ends at a certain period. Once I'm supposed to give the final, I have a week to turn in grades, and so I'll give as much time as I can. But then there is an actual date, so you have to check in weekly, do assignments. If you're supposed to, if you don't check in the first week, I'm supposed to drop you. But if you're having trouble, just contact me. In general, don't cheat, don't copy and paste, do your own writing, um, put forth the work, and you'll benefit. Okay, if you have any questions, just email me, and I think that's a good introduction. Hopefully, it's a little wandering all over the place, but that's how it goes. Um, Welcome to class. I hope you all feel welcome, and if you have questions, just email me.